Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to take 2 of this webinar for the driving tests. Unfortunately, last time as we experienced some major technical difficulties at my end with the internet. Hopefully I've got that sorted. It took me a while, 10:30 that night, to actually get it sorted, when BT decided there was something wrong and they would then split up the server and put me on a faster speed. So hopefully everything runs nice and smoothly, and apparently I haven't got 2 heads tonight, which won't have been a pretty sight for some of you. So I'd like to welcome our panellists tonight. We have our chairman with us, Lynne Barrie, and we have Linda Weston with us, who's previously been an examiner and hopefully can give us a bit of an insight into what goes on with some of the stuff like when people go off route, and help us with that, with what we're going to be discussing tonight about the new driving test, which is coming in on the 4th of December this year. So to kick things off, I will just get onto the next slide, and we're going to talk about what's different. How is it different? Well, first of all, we're going to be using Satnavs. As many of you will be aware that Satnavs are being introduced into it, and the trials ran with the TomTom, either the Go 50 or the Go 500. Seemed as though that they used 2 different types of sat-navs on the trials. At York, where I was involved with the trials, we were using the Go 500 series, but I think as they added more test centres, they moved on to a slightly cheaper version of that, and then put waypoints into them to make the sat-navs go off course onto different routes, and then the sat-nav wouldn't actually take its most direct route to the end point. So the DVSA have been looking at getting a sat-nav that will do similar for the whole of the country and take those out. And apparently there's going to be a blog released shortly by the DVSA. Apparently some people may have heard in some test centres that certain sat-navs have been spoken about, but there's no actual definite confirmation of anything. All we can say at the moment is that there's going to be a blog release. I think that's right, Lynn. There's one coming out it's going through the press office at the moment. I think you had some information about that, did you?
Yeah, we heard today that in a couple of test centres, some posters had been put up by local test centre managers with the actual make and model, but actually that's not 100% confirmed. And to be honest, I think it's better, as we've pointed out again to the DVSA, it's so much better if this can come out as one announcement to all ADIs, rather than just individual test centres getting this and then bits coming out through Facebook. It doesn't seem the right way to be doing something that's so important to everybody. So I understand that those notices will be coming down, and we'll be told very soon. There's a blog which is just being checked by the communications team, and then it should be out very soon to tell everybody which sat-nav it is that's being used.
Brilliant, thank you. And something that I've just remembered that I've not told people about here, for anybody that's new to listening to the webinars, we have a question box in the control panel on the right-hand side. If you'd like to type in any questions that you have that you want to ask, please feel free to do. We don't always get a chance to go through all the questions on air, but the questions we collate, and especially if you have some worries or concerns about what you're going to do and how it's going to be implemented, please let us know, because we can collate all these and go back to the DVSA and ask questions. So please feel free to ask questions, and we'll try to answer some of them on air tonight if we can. So that's about the control panel on the right-hand side. All of you will be on mute at the moment, and we don't tend to bring anybody in to talk because we have sometimes the sound quality and whatever doesn't work. So we tend to use just the question box. So feel free to type away. And the next bit is when I can get my thing to work again. There's going to be different manoeuvres that carry out in the test. We're going to talk about the different manoeuvres that are coming in through it, such as the stopping on the right and reversing 2 car lengths, which has been quite a controversial one. Driving into a bay and reversing out either way, that one's quite a bit different. And there's going to be one show me question on the move and one tell me question while they're in the test centre. And we'll come to those as we go through the night. So, what's been removed? Lynn?
Okay, so there's still only the one manoeuvre that's included, and what's been removed is the turn in the road and the reverse round the corner. Those have been taken out. I have to say it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't teach a turn in the road or even maybe a reverse round a corner, because the skills for those are very similar to the new manoeuvres that we're being asked to do. For example, thinking about it, I had a test a couple of weeks ago where my pupil turned into a road that was apparently blocked by a skip that was delivering something, and the examiner just said to her, "We're going to have to turn around. Can you do us a turn in the road? Just turn us around so we can get out of this road." So if they've not actually ever done that, they could be at a distinct disadvantage. So personally, although it's going, I shall still be teaching doing that. But obviously there's going to be other things to teach as well, so the time spent on it will probably be less time, but they will still know how to do it.
Yeah.
So the reversing exercise being different is that what we've got included now is a stop on the right hand side and being asked to reverse back 2 car lengths. So we've been told that this is going to be done from whilst they're moving along the road in a suitable location and a suitable place. They'll be asked to stop and pull over on the right hand side. We've also been told that if once they've pulled over, the road becomes busy or the view is blocked, that the examiner will help them and do some observations for them and help them come back out again if it's not deemed to be safe. In a similar way, we've also been told that if something was to pull up behind the car once they've pulled over, then the reverse 2 car lengths wouldn't be asked for, because obviously it would be impossible at that stage, but it would still count as the manoeuvre. So that's the stop and the pull over on the right hand side. The driving into a bay and the coming back out of it. So the new one here is the driving round into a bay, which I'm sure a lot of instructors are already teaching and have been doing for a long time, and is something really that to me it is a useful exercise for the candidates to know how to do, but they will possibly have to do this one now on a test. Now originally, excuse me while I look at my notes, but we were told that the forward bay park would generally be carried out on the test route, so they'll be going into public car parks. When I went to the recent NASP meeting, they were very keen to ask us to pass on to you if we could please not practice in all the car parks that they're going to use on test, although to begin with how we know where they're going I'm not sure, but to try and use different car parks and not just to stick with supermarket and shopping car parks, just to think that there are a lot of other ones that we could be using. We were told that was going to be out on test, but we've since had confirmation that, and I'm going to read this, in limited circumstances could be carried out on DVSA estate. So for instance, if there's a route that goes past another DVSA car park, they might go in and use it. Sometimes in larger urban areas, they say that could happen. Or if a route goes back past a test centre, although I think it's highly unlikely, they're saying they could possibly use the test centre car park. So in summary, going in forwards will mostly happen out of DVSA car parks, but there may be circumstances that dictate that that could be different.
Just on
the reverse, yeah, sorry.
Just before we go to the next one, I was talking to the local area test centre manager at York, and they've started writing to local car park companies to ask permission to do it. And I think B&Q, he said, were one of those that have given them permission at the moment. And I think that's similar across the country. I think they've said that candidates are welcome into their car parks. So I know they are writing to some of the local authorities and what have you at the moment and getting permission for going into the car parks.
Well, if it's handled correctly, really, it's quite good publicity for them, isn't it, when this all starts, that they are willing to allow people in. And at the end of the day, these candidates, when they drive their cars and they pass the test, are going to be in these car parks anyway. So why not let them go in and practice? I'm sure we're going to come up against possibly some places where people don't want us to be on their car park. But I think there's going to have to be some liaising going on here with car parks, and hopefully we might be able to help with that. But yeah, we are going to be in car parks more. While we're not going to be perhaps around people's local roads quite so much, certainly we will be seen more in car parks, because we've got different, we've got practice going in forward and reversing out, and it's part of the test. So people are going to want to practice it more.
Yeah, somebody out there, that one of the audience might be able to help me with this one, but I think, is it Q Parks or something like that, had said locally, the Q Parks is a big national company, a bit like the NCP, and they'd given permission, this was a couple of years back, that ADIs could go in for their car parks for free, because a lot of theirs are one of those that you get the ticket on the entry, and then you put your ticket back in, and you have to go to a machine and then pay and get out. But they'd given some local ADI groups free permits to go in their car parks. So I don't know if that's still the case. I think it was Q Parks, but if you've got a Q Park near you, you might be able to use that.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to see if we will be able to do this sort of thing and strike up some deals really with some of the larger companies. It would be good if we could.
That might be something that local groups want to do as well. So the local ADI associations might want to just approach some of their local authorities and see if they can get permission through that way of going into car parks.
Yeah, because you have to remember that I know a lot of ADIs don't ask permission to go into a car park and use it, but actually we should seek admission to go into a car park and use it legally. We cannot just go in and use somebody's car park for practicing. We really do need to ask permission. So it is a little bit controversial here. So if we can strike up some deals whereby we can help people find places, but I think we need to broaden our mind as to where we can go. I know I've been thinking locally and come up with a few extra places that I've not really thought of before. But when I think about it, there are masses of car parks in my area, but some of them are very, very little used.
Yeah. We've just had something typed into the question box here, which is more of a statement. But somebody's local test centre, they were told that they can only use council car parks to practice in. So that's from a local test centre that's been. Have they put a notice up there, Jeff, or is that through a local association meeting? And we'll just see if Jeff comes back with that one.
I'm making the list of questions as well, so that I can send these back, and then we can let these people know as well.
Yeah.
Ed, coming back to this DVSA saying that they may use their car parks now, only on limited times. I would think this is in the case of, it will be an emergency one if they can't get a manoeuvre done out on test and they have to do a manoeuvre because it's one of the legal requirements. So I'm thinking that's probably just for those situations rather than in general.
Right. Yeah. And apparently it was at a meeting that they had at their local test centre was where that information's come from. So thanks for that, Jeff. Right.
I understand quite a few test centres have been putting notices up, my own as well, which are asking ADIs to help with any information they know of places where people have been moved off car parks. So there's a sort of thing going around at the moment where DVSA examiners are trying to find out locally where it will be okay to go and where it won't. So they're looking for bits of help. So you may see notices like that in the test centres.
Yeah. We've just had somebody saying that they've been thrown out of one of their local car parks. Actually, it's a local park and ride one. So it'd be good for the group, and it's actually one of my local group members actually. So we'll chase that up. Remind me, Jane, send me an email. They've been chucked off one of the sites. So right, got my cursor in the right place. Reversing into a bay. And parallel park, Lynn, I think was the next one.
Well, yeah, the choice of bay is the candidates, and if they choose to do it where there's cars near or between cars, or just between the lines is really up to them, but obviously also will be dictated by the car park to a certain extent. But it's not for the examiner to tell them which bay to go into. And the reverse into the bay and the parallel parking are still options in the reversing exercise, so they will still be carried out.
Yeah.
But just one manoeuvre on the test.
There was one other thing with the bay park that we found on the trials is that when they reversed back out, they had to watch for the road markings, because if the arrows pointed in a certain direction, they had to reverse out to the correct way. And also, when they reversed back, they weren't allowed to reverse back into the bays behind them. They had to reverse out within the aisle width behind them.
Right, okay.
So if anybody has,
I don't think we've actually asked that recently, so I'm adding it to my list.
Yeah. Nav, Linda.
Right, so we've got use of a Satnav for 20 minutes. As I mentioned earlier, they are actually going to make a release a blog and tell us which Satnavs they're going to use. Not sure if we should all be using exactly the Satnav that they use, but if that's what people want to do, that's what they can do. I personally would just use my own car Satnav. Yeah. I don't see the point in going out and buying the Satnav that they're going to use, because they're all pretty much of a muchness. But they are going to release the details, so people will have choice then. There's a little bit of issue with the Satnavs and on some cars. I understand from Lynne that if the pad to sit the Satnav can't be used on the car, they're going to perhaps use the windscreen to stick the Satnav on. As there's been a few issues with the different cars.
That's what we were told. Yeah, that's what we were told. I mean, in most cars, it will sit on the mat in the centre of the area in the front. But we were told that there were some cars, I think the Fiat 500 was mentioned, and I may be incorrect on that, but where it won't actually sit, it slides. So then they said they would attach it to the windscreen. But I think you think that there might be an issue with that, Lynne.
Well, we have to say it needs to be discussed. I think you're going to discuss it at the NASP meeting. So that will be something that they'll discuss. During the Satnav drive, they will stop and do manoeuvres and legal requirements during the course of the Satnav. If a candidate goes off route, and this does happen quite regularly, but if a candidate does go off route, if the Satnav can reroute them on a short route, they will do it. If not, the examiner will revert back to using road signs and road markings as they did before. The Satnav isn't actually going to be used on every test. 1 in 5, they're going to use road markings and signs still. So we do still need to be covering both ways of teaching people that we would do anyway. I don't think that we would all just rely on the Satnav, because as we know, technology isn't the most reliable. Isn't that right, Ed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to a little thing that Lynne said earlier about using the turn in the road. A couple of years ago, I was at a test centre and they've got a level crossing, and the level crossing broke down, and it was on a single track road, and the only way they could get back to the test centre was to actually do turning the roads on that single track road. So it's really important we use that turning the road still, even with the Satnavs, because if the Satnav does go wrong and takes us somewhere we shouldn't be, we need to be able to use that turning the road.
Can I just ask a question there, Lynne? Yeah. If you've already done your manoeuvre, say you did a reverse park in the test centre, you're out on road, and then you have to do your turn in the road in the middle of the road. What happens if they make a fault on that?
That wouldn't be counted.
It wouldn't be counted?
No. The examiner will say to them, don't worry, this is something we need to do, and they'll even give guidance if necessary to get them round. But it certainly wouldn't be counted as a manoeuvre.
What happens if something serious happened?
It depends on the guidance, if it's the examiner under giving guidance, but technically it shouldn't, because the examiner will be giving guidance.
Right.
He's not going to let that situation arise, really.
Yeah.
Because he should be giving guidance.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, I'm not sure if you stride there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. As Lynn said, notices have come out, but we are going to wait until they release it on the blog to say which Satnav it is. I'm pretty certain that everyone's probably guessing at what they are, but let's wait until they tell us, and then we can decide what we're going to do. They are going to be able to store the shortest route options, and they're going to have, as Ed said, waypoints. So they'll plot in places that they want to go to do manoeuvres. So the Satnav will be guided by the routes. The routes will be pre-planned, and they will have to rotate them evenly like they do with routes at the moment. So, and that will be recorded. They will record all of these routes that are being used, and all the results will be looked at, so to make sure that they are working.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's just about covers that section.
Did you mention the revert to signs bit, Lynn? Sorry, I was just reading some.
Yeah, they can revert back to signs and road markings. When you do go back to signs, it will be exactly as we do now. They will be asked if they want to see a diagram, or whether they just want to be told, or they'll be told to follow road signs as they do now. So that won't be any different to what it is now.
Right. Okay. And this is maybe a question. I'll just be like, this is where it threw me here, because I was just reading through some of the questions. Just a quick question, which I'll direct at you, Linda. When reversing out of the bay, we're going back to the bays here, but when reversing out of the bay, can they shunt forward and come back out? If they did that, would it be recorded as a fault? It's the same as if they were driving into the bay and they don't get in square and they shunt backwards. Would that be recorded as a fault or not worthy of marking?
It depends on the shunt, how far they've gone. They are allowed to use 2 shunts in manoeuvres, as we all know.
Yeah.
It depends how much of a shunt they use. If they're using a shunt, so if they go in first of all straight in or reverse out, and there's no shunts needed, and they perhaps just touch the line, then that wouldn't be recorded. But if they're using shunts and then doing it wrong, it will be recorded as a driver fault.
So what about,
they're getting too.
You just mentioned there about not touching the line as they drive in. So are we not allowed to drive in and get the front end to swing over if you're turning right into a bay, can we not let the front of the car go over the left-hand bay that we're going next to get in?
That I don't know. I haven't been involved in that one.
Right.
I'm not sure what they're going to look at. But if there's a car there, you're not going to be able to do that anyway.
You're not going to do it. You'd have to sort of go forward, then back up. But
that's right.
I would think then that there wouldn't be a fault recorded, because it would be a necessity to get into the bay. I know some of our aisles aren't wide enough to get the arc in. And if I remember, aisles, when we did go over the lines, we didn't get a fault recorded because it was classed as deemed necessary to go across the line into the bay. I didn't know whether you'd know any different or heard any different.
No, well, it's very similar to the old reverse round the corner. Some junctions were particularly wide junctions, so there would be no reason to touch that central line as you reversed in.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was a particularly narrow road, you might have to touch the white line as you go in which case that wouldn't be recorded as a fault because you would have to do it.
Yeah.
So I would think that the driving into the bays would be looked at the same way. If there's room, if there's room, you wouldn't need to do it. But if there wasn't, then and you did go over the line, that's fine.
Right. Lovely.
Okay. I've added it to the list of questions so we can get some clarification on that, which is why it's good to have all these things coming up.
Brilliant. Just while I look at questions again, Lynn, can you just take on this slide for me, Lindy?
Yeah, that's me. It's in this, isn't it? Special needs. We know that we have quite a few of our members who've asked us a lot about special needs and how their candidates are going to be affected by this new driving test, to the point where 2 members of the NJC are going down to have another look at the test and have been invited down to look at it and discuss special needs with the examiners there, because we felt that was the best way to do this. There is a discretion for the examiner to use traffic signs or directions to replace the Satnav, but we do understand that a special needs candidate can't just get in and say that they don't want to use the Satnav. We understand that volume can be changed, that colour can be changed on it, but I feel the best way to do this now is to go down and actually ask some very specific questions down there, because there are so many special needs that whilst I think some of them have been covered, some of the slightly more unusual ones perhaps haven't. So at the moment, although the DVSA feel that they have done enough and sufficient work on this and it was included in the trials, it wasn't actually, when we looked at figures, carried out on that many people with special needs. And obviously it didn't cover all ranges, so it is going to bring in some more questions for sure. When we've done that visit, we'll have some more information, hopefully.
Right, lovely.
Statutory requirements.
Yeah, I think
Yes, sir.
Linda covered that one. They're going to put it on the Satnav drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the statutory requirements. So do people understand then what these statutory requirements are? So these are the things that have to be carried out during a driving test. So for example, every 1 in 3 tests, somebody will have an emergency stop. 1 manoeuvre is statutory. 2 normal stops have to be made during the driving test. And something that Lynne's just informed us about tonight, if we didn't know, is that the wheels must be kept turning for 30 minutes on a driving test. So, you know, that's about how long you might get stuck in a queue or end up being held up by something on a test, I'm assuming, Lynne?
No, what that means is you've got to be moving from the minute you start the engine at the beginning of the test to when we come back into the test centre and turn the engine off. There's got to be a minimum amount of 30 minutes on the road.
Right. Okay.
So we might be sitting in traffic for 10 minutes, but that is still what we consider wheels rolling. So as long as the wheels are rolling for the minimum, and it is a minimum of 30 minutes, that is carries out the statutory requirement for the test.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. Okay. So this is going to lead to much longer and more varied test routes coming up. And in fact, you said, didn't you, Ed, that in York, when you did this, you did go a lot further.
Yeah. There's going to be a slide in just a minute as well with some descriptors about how long the routes possibly they're wanting to include. But we went up to about 15 miles on one of the test routes, and it did go quite a long way out into the country, into nice open countryside. One of the routes involved quite a twisty country road, and at the end of a long straight, it actually had quite a 90-degree right-hand bend. So they were going along at 60 and having to reduce and watch the speed. So I think the reason for getting them out there is, well, that's where all the KSIs are happening, isn't it? It's 67% of KSIs are happening on country roads. So I think they're wanting to get them out there away from the centres and actually do some testing in those environments. And that's where some of the show me questions will be asked when they get out into the country as well, where they're in the quieter areas. As you'll see in the show me tell me, they're going to be asking them to do things on the move. And that's there then to put in some form of distraction, which is also why people are crashing. They're wanting that's another reason for the Satnav being there. The Satnav's not just an easy option that the examiner doesn't have to give directions. It's actually there to show distraction. A good example of that when I was training in York was we have a particular area that's quite a busy area with a zebra crossing in it, shops on the left and all the houses, an estate on the right. So a really busy crossing. We're coming down the road, and I'd programmed my Satnav to take us into a no-through road to do a turn in the road, just to show that sometimes Satnavs will direct you into a wrong area, and you've really got to watch where your Satnav's sending you. So my driver was driving down the road with a zebra crossing in front of them. Somebody walking from the shop to the crossing, which was probably about 20 metres in total. You could see them making a beeline straight for the crossing, but my pupil was reading the Satnav, watching, got their eyes fixed on the Satnav, trying to work out why the Satnav was sending them into a no-through road. I just brought the car to a stop when the pedestrian was walking across the front of the car. So I said, when are you going to look up and see that pedestrian? and the shock on their face that they'd been drawn to the Satnav and were totally consumed by the Satnav with a zebra crossing there and somebody crossing it. Boy, did they change the way that they drove the car. Yeah, they suddenly realised that this thing is actually a major distraction and can be quite bad. So it led to quite an interesting coaching conversation afterwards about how they were going to deal with that when they passed the test. What when there's no other driver, nobody else in the car to prompt them or even help. It brought quite an interesting reality to their drive. Which, leading back to the sat-nav, some of the questions here I just want to go through. Will the picture be displayed on the sat-nav? On the test trials it was. Do we know whether that's actually still a fact? I think it will be. I think the picture will still be.
It will be,
yeah.
I don't know that it isn't, yeah.
Yeah. I know that the roads, if I remember correctly, the road mark, where you get the name of the road that you're on, that was taken off, as were the speed limits as well. They were taken off. So it was really just a very plain standard picture. The other thing that I wrote down about what the sat-navs will have, there was a lot of issues with them running out of power on the trials. They've apparently got battery packs on these new ones. So the sort of the time that they will run should be vastly improved due to carrying a battery pack. And I think that may become a little bit of an issue if they're putting them in the screens or whatever. I don't know where the battery pack's going to fit or how it will affect them actually going on the window. I've never seen one with a battery pack on it. So, yeah, they're definitely longer and more varied are the test routes. And another one going back to the bays, will the candidate have to drive in between two cars? That, on the trials, was a choice. I don't know if that's been confirmed. Has that been confirmed on the new one?
Yeah, we've been told it's a choice, yes, that it is up to them. It's their choice, yeah. Just coming back as well, because I've got some frequently asked questions that NASP are preparing ready for their website. We're just getting them checked over by the DVSA. But will the examiner's sat-nav show the speed limit? And the answer is yes, it will. Speed camera alerts will be disarmed, but the speed limit will be visible. However, what I would say on that is I would want to train my pupils not to rely on that, because sometimes I know that in my own sat-nav currently, they are not always 100% correct, or they take a few moments to change. So I wouldn't want pupils relying on that 100%, if I'm honest, because I don't think I know I can't rely on my own sat-nav 100% to give me correct ones.
Yeah, not only are they late changing, but I know a few roads around us that it's completely wrong as well. It says it's a 60 road and it's been changed to a 40. So unless the sat-navs are updated regularly, and that's why mine will be out of date, because I don't update it specifically because it goes to a roundabout that used to be there and it's now a big crossroads. And that's interesting when it says at the roundabout, turn right. And they're then faced with this big crossroads going, where's the roundabout? So I've not updated mine on purpose, just to show them how things like that happen, and that sometimes you've got to train yourself to look at the destination as well as looking at the sat-nav. You look at the road signs and match the destination to the sat-nav and make sure everything still is as it was. So
yeah, I'd want to help them understand how to work speed limits out for themselves and get them to use the sat-nav just as a guide to look and think, is it the same, and query if they didn't think it was, because as you say, sometimes it's not going to be correct. But then this is real life, isn't it? That's what happens with the sat-nav.
It is, yeah, it is, yeah, exactly. So the test time, I think it's the test time for the routes is all staying the same, isn't it, Lynn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got something. Can you just do that one, Lynn? I'm just reading the question.
Yeah, just in every other respect, this new test is carried out in exactly the same way, the same time. We were told that there would be so little change to the marking sheet that we would hardly notice it at all. So in all other respects, it's going to be carried out in the same way.
Yeah, we've had one question here. How do we make sure our training and mock tests incorporate all the criteria of the new Satnav Indie Drive? For example, what are the details of the routes in our area to be used for the trial? Will they be released by the DVSA and shared with the ADIs? And what routes were we using in the trials? I think I'd like to just sort of say something about that one to start with. Is that what's happening there? Personally, for the training, I must say that I didn't actually use any specific sat-nav routes that were involved with the trials. My routes started from my local area, and what I used to do was from Selby to York is quite a varied drive on different country roads, so I could use lots of different roads to get there. And I used the waypoints to redirect so that the pupil just wasn't following a simple straight road. It would take them off course. It would maybe take them out away from York, then turn back to York, so that they didn't try and predict the route at all. And that got them more used to then that when they were on test, it didn't matter what route they were on. They actually were used to just looking at the sat-nav and listening to it and following the directions it was given. So personally, I don't want to know what the routes are. I just want to show people how to use a sat-nav. And I used to give pupils a choice sometimes as well. If they wanted to go to, let's say, grandma lived not too far away, within half an hour's drive or something, or they have friends, I got them to program the sat-nav so it would take them to a destination of their choice. And just got them used to using it. As for whether the DVSA will release test routes, I don't think they will, Lynne? They're not doing it at the moment.
Test what? Doing what, sorry?
Release test routes for the trials, for the...
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I think the best thing anybody can do when this starts is to sit in the back and watch what happens in these tests, because then we'll really get an understanding. But certainly, I don't think knowing what every single test route is ever, well, personally, I don't feel that's a good idea anyway. I think they've got to learn to cope. The more they cope in unusual places and unusual circumstances, the better they'll cope on their test.
Yeah, I think that. And from the training that I did, and I never used any routes around York other than what just took us maybe into the centre of York, wasn't any specific test route. And people that did the test found it really easy. They loved doing the sat-nav test. People that did the trials test versus using, because I still trained even when people did the control group test. I still trained with the sat-nav because it was my belief that and their belief as well, that they wanted to know how to use a sat-nav because of the technology, that's the way they were going to navigate themselves around. So people found the test using the directions from the examiner a little harder, and those that were using the test route with the sat-nav, they actually said it was an easier test. They felt a lot more comfortable, they felt more relaxed in the drive, they said it felt a more natural drive as well. So it was quite interesting to hear the different sort of approaches that people had to a standard control group test and a sat-nav test.
I'll get that confirmed, but I'm almost 100% sure that they're not going to start releasing test routes again.
No, I don't think they will.
No.
So hang on, I'll just click onto the next slide. This is an example. Lynne, I think you were at the Young Drivers Conference, and this was brought up at the Young Drivers Conference, wasn't it?
Yeah, I went to the Young Driver Conference in London, which was organised by First Car, and this came from a set of slides that Leslie Young was presenting on the day. There's not an awful lot of ADIs actually go to that conference. It's actually would be good if there were more. It's a good conference. It's just getting into London really that's maybe more of an issue. But the people there didn't know anywhere near as much about the new test, for example, as we do. And so to them, this was quite new. So Leslie had some slides and gave a presentation. And this was what she was saying. So here's her current test route example of a 37-minute test, which it's showing you where it's going and then shows you places where I think it might do some manoeuvres. And here's the revised one. So this one was going out as far as 17 miles, but you can see it's the same time, but it's certainly covering a lot further in the time.
Sorry,
She did say as well, I think you've got the next slide here.
Yeah.
I have some queries about this, but what she was actually saying was that what they would like to think is that a test with the new testing regime will include each of these items below. Now, if you look at it, it already probably does include quite a few of them. I would query how in some areas it's going to be possible for this to happen. But in an ideal world, what she was trying to show, I think, was the sort of things that would be included on one of the new tests. So a complete range of speed limits. It'll be 7 to 10 miles longer than an average route. 3 miles of dual carriageway, 4 miles of rural roads, national speed limit, 4 main roundabouts, 2 right turns at major traffic light control junctions, right turns, 5 left turns, and various pedestrian crossings. Well, I don't know how they're going to get that completely in, but I suspect that that's the sort of thing they're looking for a new test, so that they've got a complete range of where they're going and something that is probably a bit more testing. What do you think about that, Lynn?
I think it's a good cover, and as Ed said earlier, it's covering the KSIs really, where the KSIs are happening, which is really what they're looking at doing, to make sure that these people are getting out on the rural roads and understanding the national speed limits, rather than just seeing a 60 limit and thinking that's a target. Yeah. It's getting them to understand that these speed limits aren't targets, they're there for a reason. Yeah. Understanding about changing down at corners and how to drive around these sort of roads. So no, I think it's good. I think it's not going to be doable in a lot of test centres to add extra 10 miles, but having said that, if they're going to start using faster roads, you can travel up further. So hopefully it will be doable.
I think some of the major city destination test centres will really struggle with this. In the city, Birmingham, Leeds, it's going to be places like that, isn't it? And I can't imagine how they're going to do it out of the centre of London. Just to get half an hour's driving in London, you know, you might get 5 miles covered. If I remember what we did on the Olympics, it was just unreal how the traffic affected the drive. So yeah, I think it's going to be quite challenging for them to get some of these figures in. And just to answer somebody's question, 3 miles of dual carriageway there. If there's no dual carriageway, then obviously that's not going to be carried out. Some of the test centres don't always have the options to get out to these places. So I think this was just really an example to, you were saying that there was not a lot of ADIs at this Young Driver Conference, wasn't there, Lynn? And there was quite a lot of interest as to just what goes on a test, wasn't there, from the general public?
Well, it's not the general public, it's people who, it's the fire, police, ambulance, people who help run road safety courses for young people. So they're all interested in road safety, but they don't necessarily understand the driving test to the degree that, say, an ADI does who's teaching it. Yeah,
right, lovely. Just got a quick question. Will the final destination be told to the candidate? And I think they mean by that on the Satnav part. On the test trials, they weren't told. It was just follow the Satnav until further notice. And then I think the Satnav usually says something like you've reached your destination, at which point the examiner said that you were then just back under normal instruction. On the trials, the Satnav was left on, running just as in the background, and it just continued until they got to the end of the test then. Sometimes the test routes actually came all the way back and finished in the test centre, so you reached your destination back in the test centre. So there were different ways of doing that, but the candidate wasn't actually told where the end point was.
Oh, that's another question. I've got about 8 or 9 questions here now from tonight again, so that's useful.
Yeah. Right, is there any more questions, anybody? If anybody else has any more questions, I've gone through most of those. So I think this is back to me, actually. So the tell me questions at the test centre and the show me question, which is asked on the road. We've got the different. Oh, there's just a bit about this that was sent out from NASP, wasn't there? There was something about the questions, Lynn. Did we cover that point earlier or not?
No, we didn't. It is disappointing because we go to these NASP meetings, we discuss this sort of thing there, we ask specific questions, and we were told categorically at that meeting that there would now in this new test be no need to open the bonnet. It would not be a show me question. And there was something else as well, which was that windows will only be asked to be open if they're electric. Otherwise, we wouldn't be asked as a question to do it if they were manual. Since then, having sent the NASP report out, it was checked by the DVSA for accuracy, and they agreed it. And since then, they've written to us and said there are a couple of things which are incorrect. So, we've had apologies from them. I think we will find an apology and an announcement coming out. Now, they're only simple things, but the windows, even if they're manual, they will be asked to open them, not electric. And as far as opening the bonnet, what they're saying is that, and this came through the other day, that the opening the bonnet for the 3 fluids, they will be still asked to open that bonnet, but it will be done now, as I think you'll see in Ed's questions coming up, as a tell me question, and then they'll just have to give an explanation, but they still will need to open the bonnet. Yeah. So apologies for that, but it seems that sometimes these things still get misunderstood as information's coming out. That's why I'm quite nervous about information that comes out, for example, to a test centre singularly, just about the Satnav. I'd rather wait until it's out officially. But even the DVSA get it wrong, and they will be apologising, but we'll make sure that you get the accurate information.
So the tell me question for under the bonnet will be in the test centre. You said 3 fluids. Is it just down to 3 fluids now, or is it still 4? Because it was screen wash, oil, coolant, and brake fluid.
Oh yeah, well somewhere I had something. Yeah, it says here, and this is Graham O'Brien, the policy advisor. The article states the bonnet will no longer be open. This is not the case. The 3 fluid questions, oil, coolant, brake fluid, will still be asked, but in the form of a tell me question. The bonnet will be opened, followed by an explanation from the candidate. So they're dropping. So he's saying, well, I suppose you've got the show me on the move with the which is that's where that's coming in. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got use the wash wipe, and it'll be the front or the rear. Apparently, it won't be both at the same one. They're 2 separate questions. Use the demisters, and it's the same again. It will be one or the other, front or rear. The lights, that's going to be showing how you just turn the lights on. For those that have automated lights like mine, you're just going to have to turn them onto the manual setting, and then turn them back onto the automated, and it'll sort of turn them on and off. I don't know what we'd do if it's an overcast day. They maybe won't ask that question because they won't want you turning them off and then back on again. So maybe that question might be omitted on bad light days. Did you find that, Lynn? That if it was inclement weather, you didn't such as do under the bonnet, or how did you work that?
Yeah, if it's raining, we never very rarely open the bonnet. It's common sense, really. If it's raining, you don't want to be standing outside. You don't want the client getting cold. So you'd ask them to get into the car, make themselves comfortable. So I should imagine it'll be the same with this. If the weather's bad, they won't ask the bonnet questions. And as you said, with the lights, if it's not sensible, they won't use it.
Yeah. And this one was done on the trials, use of the horn. I had a couple of these that got asked to use the horn. They will have to choose a time and place where it's suitable to use the horn. And the opening and closing of the windows, again, they'd have to choose the time suitably, that they'd want to be on a straight piece of road, and choosing their times for the opening of that. Just on a brief footnote, that if the candidate doesn't know how to operate any of the show me questions, or they just get the brain freeze on the day like they do with the nerves and what have you, they'll be asked to pull up on the left. The examiner will then explain where the switch is that they need to use or how to use it, get them to practice and rehearse it for a couple of times, ask if they're satisfied with that, then ask them to drive on, and then ask them to carry out that show me question on the move. And on the tests, I believe that this can now be marked as a serious or dangerous if some sort of mistake happens. Let's say they drift towards the oncoming traffic, or drift towards a curb, or they choose an untimely point to open and close the windows around bends, corners, etc., and they lose control of the car. I believe this is going to be now marked as a serious or dangerous, isn't it, Lynne?
I think I need to get that confirmed again. I know, sorry, it seems a lot of questions that we've still got to ask, but I think this is going to keep happening for a short while until we've absolutely solved everything. I would have said yes to that, because obviously it is becoming, if it's dangerous, then it would need to be marked as such. But I will get that confirmed. I'll just add it to the list.
Right, yeah.
That's okay, yep.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, just reading a question here, because I think that was the last, yes, it was the last slide. Lynne, can you just give us a brief explanation of what the next month's webinar is going to be about with autonomous vehicles, just while I go through the questions, please?
Yeah, hi. So next month I'm gonna do a presentation on connected and autonomous cars. I did this presentation at our last meeting, and it created quite a lot of interest. So a lot of the groups were asking me to go to their group to present, but we decided that it would probably be best if we did it as a webinar, because that would give more people access to it. So we're just going to be explaining to you the difference between connected cars and autonomous cars, what it means to us and what it means to people in the future. Talk about whether we think this is going to be happening soon or not. Hopefully not. And we'll just discuss that. So any questions, send them in and I'll try and answer them for you.
I think at our meeting, Lynn, people did find that absolutely fascinating, and I think there were 6 stages, weren't there, of an autonomous vehicle?
Yeah,
that you described, yeah, which again was something I'd not really realised. So I found it really very interesting, because it is going to affect us for sure.
Oh, it will do in the long-term future, not imminent, but it will do eventually. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting subject. It's there's going to be a programme on this Thursday on Horizon about it, so that might be worth a watch as well, if you're interested. So have a little look at that as well.
Okay.
Just a question that Linda, you may be able to answer on this one. Is it not illegal for an examiner to instruct?
Yes, well, it's not illegal, but they shouldn't be instructing. They can offer guidance if needed. For instance, if they need to pull out from the right and their vision is obscured, then the candidate can ask the examiner, can you tell me if it's clear? And the examiner can give guidance. It's not instruction, it's guidance. For example, when I gave that example earlier with the car that got stuck at a level crossing, they had no choice. They had to turn the car around. So the examiner gave a wee bit of guidance, in so much as we can't stay here, we are going to have to turn the car around. I won't be marking you, but we need to turn the car around in the best possible way. So they didn't tell them as such that you need to do a turn in the road, but they're giving them the option of what to do. So it's not instruction, it is guidance.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a law as such.
No. Right. Okay.
And there'll always be unexpected things that happen on driving tests sometimes, won't there? We've probably all had it happen in our tests. I mean, a few years back, as soon as my candidate left the test centre, a lot of alarms started ringing, and we suddenly realised that there was a big problem in the city centre. And in fact, my candidate did the entire test with no traffic lights at all in her test. I mean, there were a lot, they weren't working, but she had to pass through an awful lot. Now, she knew what to do because we'd talked about this before her test, but when they got back, the examiner said, you know, she did really well, but I did have to guide us through a couple of the last ones, because otherwise we would never have got back on time, because everybody was just taking so much longer to get through the traffic lights. It's the sort, occasionally things like this happen, don't they?
Mm.
Or in the real world, if you had passengers in the car, you wouldn't sit there and not ask them to help you. So, it's a real world situation. That's them using their common sense and saying, look, I need guidance here. You're here. Can you help me?
Yeah.
So, it's not unrealistic.
Have we got any other questions then?
Just to back up on what that one, apparently we're missing the point of what this person meant by instruction. It's to do with working the controls in the car. I think it would be just classed as giving guidance, won't it, as to where the control is and how it would work, and just getting the pupil to work the controls.
From what I understand, the test is that they're testing them that can they use these controls on the move. So they're not teaching them as such at that point, are they? They're just explaining. It's very easy for a pupil to get confused on a test because they're nervous, they're not listening properly. So perhaps they're not understanding what controls they need to use. So if they can just show them, look, this is the one I want you to use, and then when they're moving, that's the bit they're being tested on.
Yeah.
I mean, I understood at the NASP meeting when we discussed this with the examiners that they were talking in a way that it would be more of a conversation, along the lines of, well, do you know where your windscreen wipers are, and do you know where that is? So have a look at it. What do you think? And it was more of a sort of almost coaching style conversation, but the examiner would tell them at the end of the day where the control was, but then they would have to use it themselves when they moved away, because the thing here is that, as Lynn's just said, it's about using something on the move.
Yeah, and they're not instructing on the move. It's a pull up and a stop, from what I understand. They actually pull up, stop, give them the guidance, and then they're asked to move away, and then do it under their own steam. So I
mean, you'd hope if they've been well trained that they would know where these things are, when they're doing the test anyway. But there's always going to be perhaps the odd time when somebody forgets or can't remember.
Yeah. Right, just very, very quickly, for those people that missed the beginning, I've had one or two people asking if this is going to be possible to watch or download. It will be on the ADNJC website, I would think from tomorrow evening, because I've got to do a conversion as to when we finish this and then upload it. So this will be available to watch on the NJC website under the webinars tab. So it'll be there for the next 4 weeks until the autonomous one's done, and then that one will get shown. Once it's been shown for that month, it then goes into a library which is visible through the members section. So that brings us to the end of there. Has any of the panel got anything else they want to add before we stop?
No, just to thank you once again, Ed, for hosting it and helping us to run these. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you've learned something there for going away and practicing. That's the end of the webinar for today.